The first time you've ever been to a Tuesday night class, then a really warm welcome. And I know there are at least 2 or 3 people from a centre in Nottingham visiting for the first time, but there might be other people who've just recently finished a beginner's course. So yeah, really warm welcome if this is your first time, and even if it's not, a warm welcome anyway. So we started last week a series of talks looking at the wheel of life, the spiral and the goal. And Vidanya introduced us to those 3 concepts briefly last week. And we're going to look for the next 3 weeks, we're going to focus on the wheel of life. So I've got Vidanya's pointing stick. And this is the wheel of life here. And in particular, we're going to be looking at the second bit of the wheel of life, the white circle and the black circle. That's what I'm going to be looking at this evening. And the talk's something like in the Tumble dryer, or going up and down and around with karma, something like that. And what you've got really in the second circle on the wheel of life, well, actually just to introduce the wheel of life generally, it's basically quite a complex but very important symbol, very important Buddhist symbol. And you could see it almost like a map of the mind, or a kind of complex symbol that explains our experience, your own experience, or your own mind even. And very, very important Buddhist symbol. So we're going to be looking at this, it's a series of circles really going out from the centre. And this evening we'll be looking at the second circle. So there's a white half of the circle, and it's got beings going upwards, having a nice time, smiling and laughing. And then there's a black circle with beings spiralling downwards, frowning and not very happy. And basically what Zania said it represents last week is our kind of momentary passing experience of pleasure and pain. Sometimes as human beings we experience pleasure and we're happy, and other times we experience pain and we're unhappy. And basically this is changing all the time. There's just lots of experiences all the time. There's kind of just the impermanent nature of our experience. We sometimes experience pleasure, sometimes pain. And there's a question, I suppose, that's been very important for human beings, as far as I'm aware, since there were human beings, which is kind of, well, why do we sometimes suffer as human beings? Why do we experience pain? Why can't we just always be happy and have pleasure? Why do we suffer? And it's a question that's really been important for human beings, and human beings have found different answers, different ways to try and explain that. So religions have tried to explain that, and so according to, if you follow a theistic religion, well, it's God, or a creator, a God. In a way, he might be punishing or rewarding human beings. A God is pulling the strings in a way and in charge of our experiences of suffering or pleasure or pain. More recently, scientists have tried to explain how the universe works, how the world works, and how we can control it. So there's different scientific laws. And more recently, human beings have kind of begun to believe more in a world without a fundamental meaning to it, just a kind of set of laws. Without a God, perhaps more and more human beings are believing in this. But the truth is, well, I think the truth is, and what the Buddha taught the truth is karma. The reason that human beings suffer, and how the mechanism and the laws that govern how we suffer or don't suffer is the law of karma, the force of karma. And this is what I'm going to be talking about this evening, is just exploring what the law of karma is, what it means and how it works. Before I do that though, I just want to say what karma isn't in a way, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what karma might be. So I just want to deal with a few of those to begin with. Some wrong ideas about karma. So karma isn't a kind of cosmic version of God. It's not like a cosmic reward and punishment mechanism. So this is quite a popular version of karma, where people say, oh, something bad happens to you, or you say, well, that's your karma, man, that's kind of bad karma. And they might be smoking something and saying that, I associate it with a kind of new age version of spirituality, where it's just that's your karma, man. So this idea of kind of what goes around comes around. So that isn't what karma is from a Buddhist perspective. There's also a kind of maybe a Hindu version of karma, which is that basically what happens to you now is your fate in a way. You've been born into a particular caste, a particular way of life, and that's your karma. That is because of how you lived in the past. And your duty is to not try and change that, not to try and change your caste, but just to kind of keep with your fate in a way. So it's quite a fatalistic, kind of deterministic, you can't change, it's just your karma. So that's another wrong view from a Buddhist perspective. That isn't what karma is from a Buddhist perspective. And then there's the kind of, what's sometimes called the Glenn Hoddle wrong view, or the Glenn Hoddle Michuditi, which is a Buddhist term. And there's a kind of unfortunate incident a few years ago where he was the England football manager until in a press, I think it was just after a press conference in a kind of private conversation with a journalist, he was talking about his views on karma, and that he thought that people with disabilities might be being punished for actions in a previous life. So again, this is a common but wrong view of what karma is. It's not that everything that happens to you is because of things that you've done in a previous life or in the past. That isn't what karma is. And Glenn Hoddle was sacked after that. I don't know if that was karma or not. Just bad luck, I think. So what is the Buddhist view on karma? If that isn't what karma is, what is the Buddhist view on karma? The Buddha was very clear. The Buddha was very clear. He was asked specifically by a wandering truth seeker who came across him. Well, he was saying, there's lots of people around who say that everything that happens to you is because of karma. Is that true? And the Buddha was very clear in his response. He said, no. Basically, I mean, that's the basic short answer. No. It was longer than that. I might have fun tonight. Actually, I've started to come down with a bit of allergy, and it seems to be making me have a bit more fun. So that's quite good. So the Buddha said, no, it's not just down to karma. Things that happen to you aren't just down to karma. There's other reasons, and he listed some of these other reasons why things might happen that aren't, and it's not just due to karma. And Buddhism does agree with the laws of science. Buddhism doesn't deny the laws of science. So there's a Buddhist list. And Daya Akshita gave a really nice talk on Dharma Day, so I'm very thankful she wrote all this out. In Buddhist scholars have developed a list of 5 different types of conditionality, 5 different categories of causes and conditions about why things might happen to us. So the first 3 cover the laws of science. So Buddhism doesn't deny the laws of science, but what Buddhism says is the laws of science don't go far enough. They don't cover all of our experience. The laws of science cover our physical experience, and there's the physical laws, so there's laws of gravity and the laws that act on physical bodies like atoms and planets. There's also biological laws, which determine why we get lurgies and get poorly and a bit hysterical rather than sensible. And then there's also laws around kind of social instincts and almost psychological laws. And so Buddhism includes all of these, but says, well, they don't go far enough. They don't cover, in a way, the spiritual world, the inner world. There are things that cannot be measured, cannot be quantified, but can be very definitely experienced, tangibly experienced. And that you could call those the spiritual laws, the inner world of the heart and the mind. And so we've also got in Buddhism the law of karma and also dharma. And karma is how we can control the bit of our experience that we can control in a way. It's it talks about our response to what's happening to us, our inner response, and it's how we can work with our mind and shape our mind, and that's what I'm going to be exploring this evening. But there's also spiritual forces that are beyond our control, outside of our control, and they're also an important part of the spiritual life, and the forces of the Dharma itself. I'm not going to be talking too much about those, I might mention them a little bit, but I'm going to be mainly focusing on karma this evening. So yeah, so as far as Buddhists are concerned, this is the kind of complete picture of how we experience things and why we experience things, why things happen to us. It's not a deity, it's not just pure chance. There are laws, there are kind of categories, there are laws about how things happen, but science doesn't go far enough. There are also spiritual laws, and it's the law of karma that I'll be exploring this evening. And I'll be doing that with the aid of two things. One will be the two very important verses of Buddhist teaching from a book called the Dhammapada, and also using the Wheel of Life. Yeah, so the two verses that I want to kind of explore, or use to help to explore karma and how we experience what we experience, as follows. So the first verse is, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, produced by mind. If we speak or act with a pure, skillful mind, then happiness will follow like a shadow that doesn't depart. And experiences, the other verse is, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If we speak or act with an impure or unskillful mind, then suffering will follow, like the wheel follows the cart of the ox, the hoof of the ox pulling a cart. So it's something like that. Got a bit of a lurgy, so it's pretty right. I've actually got the norm go round, but that's basically what they are. And I will unpack them, hopefully a bit over the next half an hour or so, and also look at the Wheel of Life. So these verses, they start off by saying that our experiences are preceded by our mind, that they are produced by our mind, and that they are led by our mind. So that's for me, a very profound and important statement. Our experiences are preceded by, led by, and produced by our mind. So that goes quite a long way to answering, well, why do we suffer? Why do we suffer as human beings? And the Buddhist answer is, well, our experiences of suffering are preceded by, and of joy and happiness, preceded by, produced by, and led by our mind. So the Buddha's main teaching was of conditionality, that everything in the entire universe is produced by conditions, and as those conditions change, the things themselves change. There's this flow of changing conditions which are conditions for other events. So this was the Buddha's main teaching of conditionality. And these verses in the Wheel of Life are an expression of a manifestation of conditionality, but in relation to our experiences, how our experiences are conditioned by and produced by our states of mind. So is this true? Is it true that how we experience the world is conditioned by our state of mind? Well, from a Buddhist perspective, and hopefully you've had some glimpse of this, some insight into this, that when we're in different states of mind, we experience the world very, very differently. It could be said, well, we live in our state of mind. We don't actually, we physically live in the world, but we emotionally and psychologically we inhabit our state of mind. And we see the world, we experience the world through the lens of our state of mind. So to give some kind of extreme opposite examples, if you're experiencing depression, then you live in the same physical world as other people around you, but the world seems very grey, very dark, very negative, very threatening, perhaps very scary. But the same person stood beside you in quite a positive state of mind. Maybe they've just fallen in love, or maybe they've had a really good time with friends. Well, they'll see the world as a very positive place, a very warm, very friendly place. And the physical world is exactly the same, but they're inhabiting, they're living in their state of mind. So the Buddha said, and the Dhammapada is regarded as the earliest recorded teachings of the Buddha. And the very first two verses of the Dhammapada, so you could say that these, in a way, are the heart of Buddhism. These are kind of core teachings of Buddhism. And what they start off by saying in the Dhammapada is these verses, our experiences are, in a way, created and influenced, led by our state of mind. And I think I had a taste of this weekend. I went to Adhisthana Retreat Centre with the Sangha, the Sheffield Sangha, for our weekend retreat. And I was just in really good states of mind, actually, just very, very positive, expansive states of mind. And that was, the world seemed beautiful, Adhisthana seemed beautiful. It seemed like, we were talking in our meeting earlier, it seemed like a pure land, everything just seemed beautiful. and everybody seemed beautiful, and yeah. And then I was very much looking forward to coming home to see Lucy and Robert, my wife and son, young son. But then it was interesting, my state of mind changed as I was getting home, and I started to become kind of a bit anxious, a bit worried about whether Robert would be pleased to see me or whether he'd be upset because I'd been away like the last time I'd been away. And I started to worry about whether he'd be okay or not. And I got home and I noticed he had a bang on his head, a bruise on his head, and he was a bit kind of grumpy. And I started to get into quite a more negative state of mind actually, and I started to become quite critical. And I started to think, well, the world's more of like a place full of dangers to my son, and I became kind of critical of all the people that might be threatening or harming my son. And I could see this happening, just my state of mind. In a way, the world just changed from being a very beautiful Pure Land to being a kind of threatening place with dangers in it. And I could see it was down to my state of mind changing quite quickly. So hopefully you've had an encounter with this teacher and you've had kind of glimpses of how this is true. When you're in different states of mind, the world seems very different to you. And as well as on quite a mundane level, that changing is also, on a transcendental level, you could say, on a spiritual level, the world can actually seem very, very different sometimes. And I was remembering today, the first time I ever meditated, I was 12 years old, 13 years old, something like that, at school in Sheffield, and the RE teacher taught us to meditate. I don't know why, but he did, and I was really grateful that he did, because it had a really massive effect on my life, actually. But I remember, it was a normal day, and then we went into this chapel area and did this kind of guided meditation. And, the different children had different responses. Some people fell asleep, some people were giggling and got sent out. But I did the meditation, I followed his instructions, I did the meditation. I remember coming outside and being a bit confused, actually, thinking, well, what's happened to the playground? The playground is different, somebody's changed the playground, what's happened to it? And at the time I didn't really realise that my mind had changed and that the playground looked different. But I was in a different state of mind. I just thought, well, something's different about the playground, what's happened? I couldn't understand what had happened, but I knew something important had happened, and I associated that with meditation. So hopefully you're convinced by now that our states of mind affect our experience of the world around us, and you could say that we inhabit our states of mind. So if the realm that we inhabit, if our world that we inhabit is conditioned by our state of mind, the next obvious question really, if you're a truth seeker, the next obvious question is, well, what conditions our state of mind? What is it that conditions our state of mind? And the second part of these verses gives us the answer to that. And the second part of the verses say, well, if you speak or act with an impure mind, then suffering will follow. And if you speak or act with a pure mind, then happiness will follow. So what the Buddha taught was that our actions, whether skillful or unskillful, determine our state of mind. And this is basically what the law of karma explains. The law of karma explains how, if we act in a certain way, a certain state of mind will be produced. We will be changed by our actions. We'll be modified. Our consciousness will be modified by how we act, how we behave, and as a result, we will experience the world differently. We'll live in a different world. So this is where the wheel of life comes in again. So you'll notice on the wheel of life here, and here, we've got 6 different realms. There's 6 different segments. It's like almost like a wheel with spokes, and it's divided into 6 different segments. And you could say the whole of the wheel of life is an expression of how karma manifests in different ways in our experience. But basically, these realms depict 6 different states that we can inhabit, 6 different realms that we can inhabit, that we can live in. And they're produced by different states of mind. But the whole of the wheel of life is conditioned by 3 particular states of mind, and they're right at the centre. So you've got a pig, a cockerel, and a snake. And they're said to symbolise greed, hatred, and delusion. not necessarily in that order, but greed, hatred and delusion. And they're the kind of the root poisons, the root kind of states of mind that cause us to suffer. And the different realms, these 6 different realms on the outside are kind of realms we can inhabit and experience because of different kind of blends, different combinations of these states of mind. So we've got down at the bottom beings with flames and all kinds of nasty things happening to them, suffering very badly, and this is a hell realm. And the hell realm is produced by states of extreme aversion and ill will, aversion to life, aversion to other people. And beings are said to inhabit and dwell in a hell realm with intense suffering through those states of mind. And here we've got beings with who are very, very hungry, with bellies swollen with hunger, but very, very tiny mouths where it's very difficult for them to feed themselves. This is said to be the hungry ghost realm. Beings who beings who experience intense craving, intense addiction, and are unable to satisfy that. So if we experience states of extreme addiction or craving, we can dwell in a hungry ghost realm. We've also got over here a load of animals. We've got various sea animals and land animals going about their business, animal business. And this is the animal realm. And it's said to, it depicts beings in states of ignorance, really, who are low levels of consciousness, who are concerned mainly with their basic needs, basic instincts of kind of food, comfort, danger, sex, safety. So if beings are dwelling in these kind of states of mind, then they will inhabit the animal realm. And then you've got the very competitive titans. And these are sometimes depicted as like ogres or very, very fierce, strong beings. And beings in the titan realm are very, very competitive. They're greedy, craving for power, and they've got ill will towards anybody who's going to get in the way of their power, their control. And then you've got the God realm, the Deva realm, beings who are experiencing pleasure, comfort, and not a lot of suffering, just in a way, basically experiencing lots of pleasure, lots of bliss in a way, but no discomfort. And funnily enough, that might sound like a nice place to be. And it may be a nice place to be, but from a Buddhist perspective, that isn't where we're trying to get to. We're not trying to get to the God realm, where we just experience pleasure and no discomfort, because it's not possible to progress spiritually in the God realm. So hopefully I'll say a bit more about how spiritual progress is possible, but the God realm isn't. It's probably where we're trying to get to, most human beings are trying to get to experience constant pleasure, but it's not a very productive realm spiritually to be in. So traditionally, these 6 realms are seen as being connected with rebirth. So there's a cycle of karma and rebirth. So that in Buddhist tradition, when you die, you will be reborn into one of these realms, and your next lifetime will be spent in one of these realms, depending on the predominant states that you've built up, that you've accumulated. And that's I suppose I'm quite comfortable with that idea, but a lot of Westerners. It doesn't really fit well with our kind of scientific culture, our kind of way of regarding the world. We don't rebirth. The idea of rebirth doesn't sit comfortably, and it's quite a complex kind of concept to explain as well. So I'm not going to go there. But what I'm going to say is basically you don't need to believe in rebirth. You don't need to engage with the idea of rebirth to see the truth and the importance of karma, actually, because we can see the law of karma affecting our states of mind and the realms we inhabit in this very lifetime. In fact, it's one of the most crucial laws, one of the most crucial forces at work in our experience. So you might, another valid way of seeing these realms is that they are realms that we can inhabit, perhaps for months at a time, years at a time, weeks at a time. We may experience a hell realm of depression or really difficult, dark mental states. We may experience spells in a hungry ghost realm where we're addicted to things and can't find nourishment, can't find fulfillment. We might experience years in an animal realm where all we're really bothered about is having a good time, just being comfortable. We can see the law of karma having taken an effect in our day-to-day life. We can see that depending on our state of mind, we can experience different realms, and we will be in effect born into different realms, moment by moment, week by week, depending on our state of mind. And there's another important verse of Dharma, a verse of Buddhism, which goes something like, "I am the heir to my actions. Actions are my parents. Actions are the womb from which I am born." In a sense, it's actions that determine the state of mind that we have and the realm that we're born into. And hopefully you'll have seen this before, something like this, on the beginner's course. So, basically from our actions, we develop habits. We develop a string of habits, a collection of habits, and the habits become a personality. So in a sense, our personality, who we regard ourselves, is just a habit. And Bodhinaga was explaining this at the weekend, and there's a quote from Sangha Night which said, well, we are, in a sense, our view of ourselves is a habit, and in most cases a bad habit actually. And and that becomes our life. And then how we habitually, our habitual mental states, our habitual responses, they become our habitual world that we live in. So you get kind of a world which is created by our actions. We get the same kind of, it becomes cyclical, and this is where we get the outer rim of the wheel of life. Basically shows a vicious cycle, a kind of cycle we get trapped into where we end up recreating the same old circumstances, the same old kind of realms, the same old kind of states over and over again. We act in habitual ways, we develop habits, and we create habitual situations, habitual scenarios. We end up kind of recreating them over and over again. Yeah, and I think I would also show it something like this. Hopefully you can see this, but it says something like action, feeling, and that's my summary of the outside of the wheel of life. Basically, that in the past we've acted in particular ways. And because we acted in particular ways in the past, we have a particular feeling right now in the present. And that's how the law of karma works, basically. We have volitional choices, we make decisions, and we get a consequence, we get a feeling in the present. And based on that feeling in the present, we act in the same way, actually. We act in the same way we've always done to try and avoid or deal with that feeling. And we end up creating the same kind of feeling again. And it goes round in a cycle, really. We just end up acting in the same way. We get the same kind of responses that we create, and we keep acting in the same way. It'd be good if I thought of some examples, and I'm going to pick from the example of smoking that we often use. So, because I've smoked in the past, let's say I'm a smoker, I've smoked in the past, I get the usual feeling of wanting a cigarette, a real pang, a real craving for a cigarette. So my usual action is to smoke because I want a cigarette. And then in the future, I get that same pang, that same craving, that same thirst for a cigarette. And it just becomes deeper and deeper. The more and more I repeat the cycle, the deeper and deeper it gets. So we end up creating the same habitual self. We end up inhabiting the same kind of habitual situations. And because of the law of karma, we end up in the same kind of emotional states, and we end up experiencing the same kind of world. So we kind of just locked in this kind of cycle of recreating the same situations over and over again. But there is a sixth realm which I didn't mention, and the sixth realm is very important because the realm of the humans over here is where we're aiming for in the wheel of life. We're aiming to spend as much time as possible in the human realm. And Bodhinaga talked last week about the wheel of life, and he said, you could imagine it's a bit like a computer game, and with lots of different rooms. There's like a castle with lots of different rooms, and you can go around and you can score points in lots of different rooms. So each of the realms you can do different things, and you can have pleasure or pain, and you can do exciting things. But the whole idea of the computer game is just to get out of that castle. So the wheel of life, the whole idea is not to spend time in those realms, but to get out of the wheel of life. And the way we do that is through the human realm, because the human realm is a realm where we experience a balance of pleasure and pain. So we experience enough pain to want to do something about it, actually to want to change. We're not escaping that experience of pain. And we experience enough pleasure to get a sense of something higher, states of consciousness that are higher than where we are now, to be attracted towards those states of beauty, states of expansive consciousness. So in the human realm, we get a mixture, a combination of those that we can actually embark on a spiritual path, a spiritual life becomes possible. But crucially as well, in the human realm, there is awareness, and this is the crucial factor, because with awareness, that's where the law of karma really starts to operate. As human beings, the difference we've got from beings in all the other realms, if we are aware of what's happening, we can step back, and it's called self-reflexive awareness. We can become aware of our actions, and we can become aware of the consequences. We can watch them, we can observe them, we can become an observer, and we can become aware that we are aware. There's this kind of whole series of reflexive awareness is possible. So, through awareness, it's possible to escape this vicious cycle, this kind of habitual round of the same over and over again. With awareness, we can create a gap. So, the gap. I'll use a stick. The gap. Good. Yeah. So basically, the law of karma. It shows how we get trapped on the wheel of life. We kind of do the same things habitually. But it's also through karma that we can escape, actually. Through karma, we can develop awareness. Through karma, we can choose different actions. Creative actions become possible. And we can set up whole new experiences, really. And so Daniel talked last week about the wheel of life, in a sense, is you could view it as being flat. It's on the same plane. It's on a kind of mundane plane. And all the different realms are just on this same plane, and we go in and out, spend different times in them. But when we embark on the spiritual path, when we start to act creatively with a different response, it's possible to create expansive states of mind which take us to higher levels of consciousness, and we experience higher levels of being, higher realms of being. And those states of mind lead to even more expansive states, and they lead to even more expansive states. So this spiral of ever increasing, ever bettering states of mind and levels of experience gets set up. So we'll be hearing more about the spiral and the spiral path and spiral conditionality over the weeks to come. But basically, it's possible to escape the wheel of life through karma. Initially through karma, we set up new positive habits, and we act in different ways. I was going to give you an example of a relationship and how the wheel of life in the kind of cyclic mode applies to relationships, as well as just kind of habits like smoking or comfort eating or basically all of our habits, all of our experience. It also affects relationships in a more complex way. And I remember we teach this on week 2 of the beginner's course. And it might seem, people that listen to this might think, well, I know this, Bodhinaga is telling me what we learned on week 2 of the beginner's course, why is he telling me this again? But basically this is the heart of Buddhism. This is, for me, the most important teaching in Buddhism. So it's not basic Buddhism, it's the whole of Buddhism, really. So it's very, very important. So even if you've heard it before, it's very, very important to reflect on this. But anyway, I wasn't planning to say that. I was planning to tell you a story about my neighbour, Barry, who I got into a bit of a kind of cyclic relationship with, where one time it was snowing and Barry knocked on our door and shouted at my wife Lucy because she'd parked the car in front of his path. But we'd recently moved to the area, we didn't know about his path, and it was snowing, so we couldn't really see. And so I had a response of feeling quite angry towards Barry. I didn't like Barry. And so when I saw Barry in the street, I ignored him. I didn't I might say hello to other neighbours, but not to Barry, because he was nasty and he'd been horrible. So I wasn't friendly towards Barry, my neighbour. And this became basically just a habitual way of relating to Barry, and he ignored me. We kind of ignored each other, and he kind of became firmly set as my enemy in the 4th stage of the Metta-bhavana. And basically on an introductory course I realised this was happening, and because people were telling me about the gap. I might have even been teaching about the gap. I can't remember if it was at a time when I was teaching it, but I realised, I'm doing this with Barry. I'm in a kind of cyclical relationship with him, and we're just kind of perpetuating the same old dynamic. I started to smile and be friendly towards Barry, and it didn't really change his behaviour, but I started to feel differently towards him. He wasn't an enemy, he was just my neighbour Barry, really. And then there was one time, maybe a year or so later, that somebody had parked in front of his drive, and this was something that was a real trigger for Barry. He didn't like people parking in front of his drive, and he came banging on my door, and I thought he was going to tell me off again. He said, someone's parked in front of my drive, do you know who it is? And I said, I don't know who it is, but I've got a free morning. If you need to go anywhere, I can take you somewhere, I'll take you there. And he said, no, you don't need to do that. But I think that really shook him out of that dynamic, actually. I just decided, I did something different. I did something ethical, something generous, something friendly. And that kind of shook us both out of that dynamic. And now Barry acts like one of my best friends now. He's always really happy to see me. He waves at me. If you see him out and about, he's always really happy, really smiley. We basically just got trapped in this kind of habitual, cyclic way of relating to each other, and just through making some small changes, ethical changes, that's completely different now, completely changed. That's the story of Barry. So the second of those verses from the Dhammapada says, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If we speak or act with a pure or skillful mind, then happiness follows like a shadow that never departs. That's quite a nice image to reflect on, the idea that happiness is just always at your side like a shadow, if you speak or act in a skillful way. But this second verse sets out how we change those cycles. It's through creative action, through speaking or acting or thinking in a kind of pure, in a skillful, ethical way. That's the route to happiness. So instead of being ruled by our past and doing the same habitual things, we can take control of our life. We can take control of the direction of our life. We can take responsibility for our mental states, for our situations, for our actions, and we can start to act consistently in an ethical way, and that will create a completely different future. So instead of acting from greed and hatred and delusion in the centre of the wheel, that's the wheel of life. But it's possible to escape the wheel of life by acting in ways that are conditioned by love instead of by hatred, and by generosity and contentment instead of greed, and through wisdom, actions which are informed by wisdom instead of ignorance. So we'll hear more about spiral conditionality. But I just want to talk a little bit about what does that feel like if we're actually inhabiting the gap. The experience is as though we have different strands of our being. It's as though we experience there are different strands to ourselves, to Bodhinaga. So I'm in a situation, and it's not. Sometimes there's just lots of different options, lots of different choices, and depending on how aware I am, it can seem like lots of choices, or it can seem like, there's no choice, I've just done it habitually, I've just kind of reacted habitually. But if with awareness, more and more kind of choices open up, different paths open up, different strands of our being become apparent to us. So the law of karma says, basically if we act in the same old way, it strengthens and deepens our habitual old self. But we can, if we do something creative, it weakens those strands. And likewise, if we do something generous, it creates a new habit, it creates a new strand in our being, and it strengthens that. And the Buddha used an agricultural image, because he lived in an agricultural society, but he talked about irrigating, and this really struck me. I really like reflecting on this image. The Buddha talked about farmers will irrigate water, but the wise person will irrigate their mind. And I really like reflecting on this image, the idea that we are we're trying to kind of divert our impulses, our kind of emotions, our energy from kind of habitual wastelands in a way, where it just gets wasted and creates suffering, into divert that into a course which is going to be much more positive, maybe into a beautiful garden or an allotment where we're growing lots of fruit and vegetables. So we're trying to kind of, in a way, we're trying to choose what we grow, what we nurture, rather than a wasteland of these negative states. We're trying to irrigate and cultivate beautiful states. And there's also a Western image or Western phrase which depicts or gets across karma, and that is that you reap what you sow. And I heard there's two songs where I've heard that. One is "It's Such a Perfect Day." Can't remember who sang that, but Lou Reed sang that. And then there's a collection of people sang it. That lady from Them People, I can't remember what her name, Heather Small, yeah. So there's lots of people sang it anyway. But one of the words, one of the verses, one of the lines was, "You're going to reap just what you sow." And so there's in a way it also is an image that gets across karma, that we are in the present moment where we are sowing actions that we're going to reap with states of mind in the future and a kind of personality in the world in the future. And there's an Adele song that I was trying to sing this morning, "Rolling in the Deep," and then she talks as well about you're going to reap what you sow. So there are kind of Western images of connected with karma. But there's a Buddhist list. I'm going to talk about a Buddhist list next. We usually have a Buddhist list in every talk, or most talks. And this is a list of different types of karmic action, different ways that we can act that will influence our state of mind. And the first type is called heavy karma. And I associate that again with the kind of joint smoking spiritual person. It's heavy karma man. Heavy karma is a kind of emotional action, an impulse, an action which will have a kind of powerful effect on your life for a long period of time. So very, very strong unethical states or actions like murder, violence, or even we may be unlikely to actually murder somebody, but we might the thought might arise sometimes, and that will have a kind of long-lasting effect on our consciousness. Like really strong, powerful negative emotions will leave a kind of shadow on our consciousness and an influence on our consciousness for a long period of time. But also likewise, there are positive heavy actions, heavy karma. So meditation is considered to be a heavy karma. So when we sit down and do the metta bhavana, that is going to have a long-lasting effect on our consciousness for a long time. If we go on retreats, people do talk about this. When I speak to them about retreats, it feels like they experience the benefits of retreats for kind of weeks and months to follow. So going on retreat will have a lasting, heavy effect on your consciousness. And I see the metta bhavana very much as a kind of karmic meditation practice. We're putting effort in, we're putting karmic effort in to cultivate different states of mind, different responses, ethical responses of love, of kindness, of compassion. And we can experience the fruits of those, the karmic fruits of those. It feels pleasant actually when we cultivate metta. It feels very, very pleasant. And we can experience our relationships changing with people. So it does have the metta bhavana is a heavy karmic action. So if you take one thing away from the talk, just take away the importance of the metta bhavana meditation. If you take two things away from the talk, the second is the importance of the mindfulness of breathing meditation. Because through the mindfulness of breathing, you become aware, you create awareness, and that creates the gap in a way. There is no possibility of escape from the wheel of life without awareness. And it's through the mindfulness of breathing and the practice of mindfulness that we cultivate awareness. We become increasingly aware of the different strands, the different options in each moment. And it's like the whole process, the whole wheel slows down. The more awareness we cultivate, it's like the reactions, the impulses slow down, there's more choice becomes available. And I was thinking, when I was thinking about this talk, of an image from The Matrix, the film The Matrix, where towards the end of the film, the agents shoot bullets really fast at Neo, Keanu Reeves, and they just slow down. He just looks at them, and they just slow down, and then they stop, and he just puts his hand up, and all the bullets just stop. And then he picks one up and looks at it, and then puts it on the floor, and all the bullets just fall down. And that's for me a kind of an image of what I aspire to with mindfulness and awareness, that all of the different consequences, all of the different actions, all the options are just there, and they're completely slowed down, and then it's very easy just to kind of choose to untangle the bullets in a way are just drop to the floor. So that's for me, I really like that image from the Matrix. Yeah, so there's heavy karma, and there's also habitual karma, and that's largely what I've been trying to talk about up until now, kind of the habits that we drip by drip cultivate. If every time we do something mean or stingy, it becomes stronger and stronger. So drip by drip, we just habitually build up more and more momentum behind unskillful actions. But also, when we deliberately, consciously practice ethics and try to practice the 5 precepts, where we are drip by drip, slowly building momentum, building up new habits. So habitual karma is also very, very important, because it's going to determine who we become. If we do something like heavy and serious, that's going to have a big effect on us. But also the things that don't seem serious, but we do over and over again, are very, very important. Actually, they will add up. They will add up to becoming who we are and how we experience the world. So they're also very important. And there's a third type of karma which is considered to be important, and that's called death proximate karma. So the idea in traditional Buddhism, when you are about to die or close to death, the actions and the particular kind of states of mind you cultivate close to death are very, very important, because they will determine where you go to from this life. So they're considered to be very, very important. And again, how you take rebirth and death is up to you. But there's an order member who I knew a little bit, who I've talked about before when I talked about death, a guy called Bodhinaga who lived in Blackburn. And he died a couple of years ago. And as he was approaching his death, I was really struck by how he prepared to die and how he died. And in the kind of months leading up to his death, he deliberately asked for order members and Sangha, for Triratna Buddhists, to visit him, to spend time with him, and also to send him his merits, in a way, to what they thought, the positive qualities that they thought he had, so that he could try and cultivate them, become more aware of them. And he wanted to surround himself by the order and by Triratna Buddhists in his last weeks and months, so that in his next life he would find Triratna order again. That was really important to him. He wanted to find the Dharma again. He wanted to find Triratna Buddhists again. So according to the Buddha and Buddhism, what you do in the kind of last weeks and months of your life is also very, very important. It's considered very, very important. But again, you don't have to view it necessarily in that way. You can think in terms of situations you're going into. So the particular things that you choose to do just before you enter a situation will colour, will perfume your experience of that situation. And I very much had this in mind this morning and today, because I was preparing to write this talk, and I was starting to feel a bit worried, a bit anxious about it, but also a bit bored. I didn't want to kind of do the work I needed to do to prepare the talk. I wanted to distract myself, to do something that seemed like fun, but probably wouldn't put me in a good state, actually. And I was aware, well, if I do that, then I'm not going to be in a good state when I'm giving the talk. So it's like if you're proximate, if you're close to doing something which is a situation that's important, well, what you do, the actions you do just before that, leading into that, are very important. I don't know if that's a traditional way of interpreting it, but that seemed to make sense to me. And so this morning I decided to do some singing instead of searching on the internet for a few hours. I decided to do something that would engage me emotionally and be lots of fun. And that seemed to work, actually. I chose to just sing some songs that I've been practicing with Sangha Night, who's a very good singing teacher. And and she's very cheap, very cheap. And I'm having a lesson tomorrow morning with Sangha Night. But I decided to practice some songs, and what that did was just put me in a really positive state of mind. I felt very happy, and I felt kind of connected with myself. And then I just returned to writing the talk, and it felt like that was a very healthy, very skillful thing to do, rather than try and distract myself from the boredom or the discomfort by just trolling on the internet for hours. So proximate karma, what you do immediately before you go into situations, will have a lasting effect on your consciousness and on your mind. There's just a couple of other things. Mantras. I think mantras are important. This morning again, I was just thinking about the talk, and I decided to chant some mantras. And mantras can transport me to a different realm. You know, that my consciousness can be taken to a different realm by chanting mantras. It just might not be this experience by everybody, but for me, sometimes chanting mantras just takes me to a different realm. The world, again, like my experience of meditation when I was 12, the world seems different, it looks different if I chant mantras. I particularly seem to notice beauty in the world more, but sometimes the world seems more alive, more kind of archetypally alive, more alive. And sometimes on retreats, I just have a sense that the world is alive, the universe is alive, that the trees are alive. And it feels sometimes like the trees are whispering or talking or waving at me. It might sound like I'm a bit mad. I was talking to somebody at the weekend, and they have a similar experience on retreats. It just seems like the trees become alive on retreats. And it's, so meditation, mantra, ritual seems to have that effect on my consciousness. It takes me to a realm where the world seems more alive and more beautiful. So mantras and ritual, I think, would also come under the heavy karma category. But basically, there's different things that you can do, but what we say on the beginner's course on week 2 is just do something different, actually. Just do something different to what you would usually do. And that is a way of setting up a whole spiral of creative conditionality. So it could be just go to work a different way. You always walk to work the same route, but just one day going a different route to work, it takes you out of your kind of, I suppose it's a sleeping state. It's as though when we're unaware and habitual and cyclic, we're in a sleepy state, we're just not really awake, not really aware, but just choosing to do something different, even if it's not necessarily ethical, or it can just shake us out of that and make us more aware of the choices. And so we become more creative in our actions. So just doing something different actually is the way to start. Yeah, and that's when I was going to tell the rest of my Barry story, which I've already told. So karma is really important. Karma is very, very important. And I agree with Subhuti. I was studying some talks by Subhuti with some guys training for ordination, and he talks about these different niyamas that I listed before. When he's talking about karma, he says, well, the law of karma, it's a law like the law of physics or the law of gravity. It's a law in the universe. And it should be taught to everybody, actually. As Buddhists, we're very, very fortunate that we're taught about the law of karma. It should be taught to everybody, he says, alongside sciences in the syllabus. It's really important, it's crucial. The law of karma, how we create our world in a way through our mental states and our actions, it's crucially important. And it's the law or the force through which we can transform our states and the world through our actions. So we can set up progressively more and more beautiful states, more and more expansive states. We get in the spiral path that just leads us to ever more progressive and expansive and more beautiful states. So karma is a force, it's a law just like the force of gravity or the law of gravity. Karma is a force, and you need to use it in the spiritual life. You need to work with the law of karma. So Subhuti says, just as an engineer will work with the law of gravity to build a bridge, we need to work with the law of karma to build and craft our different self, a future self. We need to use the law of karma. So basically don't be ruled by the past. Don't be ruled by what you have always done or habitually do. But and don't give in to the kind of what feels like the inevitability of. Well, for me, it feels like sometimes it's inevitable. Like I'm going to do the same thing again, and even though I'm aware of it, it just feels inevitable. I'm going to do it anyway. And basically, don't be ruled by the past. Don't be ruled by a fixed view of, well, I'm like this and I can't change. But be drawn forward by who you could be, a positive vision of who you could be. So that's where the goal comes in. So we'll be talking in a few weeks' time also about the goal in Buddhism. We need to have a really positive vision of who we're going to move towards and have that in mind. So instead of being ruled by the past, we can be drawn towards a positive vision of the future. And if we can spend more and more time in the gap, then we can dwell in the gap, and we can, eventually become like Neo in the Matrix, where we can just see all of those strands and pick them apart and just choose what we're going to do. But I want to end just with talking about karma and the Sangha, because the Sangha is very, very central to what we do at Sheffield Buddhist Centre and also in Triratna Buddhist community. So I want to talk about karma and Sangha and also about the Dharma. the force of the Dharma, which is quite mysterious and outside of our control. But there's an image which apparently comes from the Buddha. I didn't realise it comes from the Buddha. I've heard Vedanta use it before. But there's an image of a collection of logs, a collection of twigs and logs. Some of them are quite damp, some of them are a bit dry, and some of them are kind of glowing with fire. And basically, putting them all together, you can create a fire. You can dry out some of the damp woods, you can make them drier, and you can create a fire collectively. And for me, this is a really powerful image of the Sangha, that there are, each of us individually is a log or a twig. Some of us are a bit damp, a bit soggy. Some of us are a bit drier. Some of us are glowing with embers, with fire of the Dharma. And it's almost like if we can work on ourselves through karma, we can become drier, more flammable, that's the right word, isn't it? Flammable. And it's almost like a glow of the Dharma can start to kind of glow within us, within our heart. This kind of Dharma and this kind of mysterious force of the Dharma can start to glow within us. And if we all collectively pile together on top of each other, I suppose that's kind of not literally how we do it. If you put all these bits of wood together, then what will happen is we'll set a blaze, we'll set a fire with the Dharma. Something much bigger and very potent will start to emerge, which will be the atmosphere and the culture, the blaze of the Dharma. And I think that's a very inspiring reason to practice with karma. It's that on our own we can become a bit drier, we can become a bit less damp, but that's in a way not something really to aspire towards. I think we should aspire towards collectively becoming a blaze, becoming a light with the Dharma as a Sangha.